In December of 1975, in Paris, a man entered the OPEC headquarters located in Vienna, carrying a submachine gun. In mere moments, 11 hostages lay dead, while 70 others found themselves held at gunpoint. Oil ministers from around the world were being forced onto an aircraft headed for Algeria. The individual directing this violent spectacle went by the name Carlos. The world would eventually recognize him as the Jackal, becoming the most hunted terrorist of the 20th century. A hired gun who offered his deadly skills to whoever paid the most, leaving behind a path of corpses spanning 3 continents. What remained unknown to the world was that Israeli intelligence had been observing him, monitoring his movements, pursuing him relentlessly from the very first time he squeezed a trigger. For 20 years, Mossad followed his trail through the shadowy corridors of Cold War Europe, through safe houses scattered across the Middle East, and deep into the Soviet intelligence network that provided him sanctuary. This account chronicles that pursuit, a strategic game of chess unfolding over decades, where each decision held deadly implications, and the ultimate victory arrived not through gunfire, but through treachery from the very apparatus that had built him up. To comprehend Carlos the Jackal, one must first understand the environment that shaped him. He entered the world as Ilich Ramirez Sanchez on the 12th of October, 1949, in Caracas, Venezuela. His father, José Altagracia Ramirez Navas, a devoted communist, gave him a name honoring Vladimir Ilich Lenin. José worked as a lawyer and raised his 3 sons, Ilich, Lenin, and Vladimir, to perceive capitalism as their adversary and revolution as their inherited duty. The family enjoyed a comfortable existence by Venezuelan measures. However, José made certain his children grasped that such comfort stemmed from exploitation. Their household overflowed with Soviet publications, images of Lenin and Stalin adorning the walls, and endless conversations about class warfare. Before reaching his teenage years, Ilich had memorized portions of Das Kapital and could engage in sophisticated debates about dialectical materialism with the skill of a trained theorist. When Ilich turned 17 in 1966, his father arranged for him to attend Patrice Lumumba University in Moscow. This institution existed specifically to educate foreign revolutionaries in communist philosophy and clandestine activities. The university functioned as a manufacturing center for Soviet influence agents. Students arriving from Africa, Latin America, and the Middle East would eventually return home armed with both ideological passion and hands-on training in sabotage, propaganda distribution, and guerrilla combat techniques. Ilich flourished in these surroundings. He achieved fluency in Russian, pursued studies in engineering and political science, and received instruction in firearms proficiency and hand-to-hand combat. However, his teachers documented concerns in their evaluations. He lacked discipline and displayed arrogance, showing greater fascination with women and Western musical culture than with the demanding requirements of revolutionary dedication. The year 1970 brought his expulsion from the university due to inadequate academic results and behavioral infractions. Officials cited his lack of revolutionary commitment as the formal justification. The actual explanation was that even the Soviets, despite creating numerous operatives over the years, detected something unstable and impossible to manage in this young Venezuelan. Though humiliated, Ilich remained undeterred and journeyed to Beirut. At that time, the Palestinian struggle was drawing revolutionaries from every corner of the globe. Lebanon in 1970 served as headquarters for numerous liberation movements. The PLO maintained an open presence within refugee camps, providing foreign volunteers with guerrilla training and ideological education. Ilich aligned himself with the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, known as the PFLP. This Marxist-Leninist organization, under the leadership of George Habash, rejected negotiation and embraced armed conflict and international acts of terror. The PFLP pioneered the tactical use of aircraft hijackings as political warfare tools, commandeering planes to hold hostages for ransom while directing worldwide focus toward the Palestinian struggle. Ilich underwent training at PFLP facilities in Jordan and Lebanon. He mastered bomb construction, assassination methodologies, and the operational tradecraft that would come to define his professional life. His trainers observed that while he displayed exceptional weapons handling and complete fearlessness, he also exhibited recklessness and superficial ideological understanding. He appeared more captivated by the romantic appeal of revolution, the weaponry, the peril, the fame, rather than the laborious political efforts necessary for building lasting movements. By 1973, Illich had assumed the working alias Carlos and launched his career as an independent contractor available for employment. His capabilities could be purchased by anyone with adequate funds: Palestinian organizations, Libyan intelligence agencies, the East German Stasi, even private financiers seeking to undermine Western administrations. He operated as a mercenary cloaked in revolutionary language, someone who spoke of anti-imperialism while residing in upscale hotels and frequenting costly restaurants. Mossad's initial awareness of him emerged in late 1973 when intercepted communications connected him to an unsuccessful rocket assault on an El Al flight at Orly Airport in Paris. The attack demonstrated amateurish execution. Two operatives launched Soviet-manufactured Strela missiles toward a departing Boeing 707 but failed to make contact. French authorities apprehended the attackers, who mentioned during questioning a Venezuelan coordinator called Carlos. At that moment, the name carried no significance. It became just another entry in Mossad's records, one among countless names linked to Palestinian militant activities. Yet within 2 years, that very name would dominate every intelligence discussion taking place in Tel Aviv. The first significant action that elevated Carlos on Mossad's priority roster took place on the 21st of December, 1975. Carlos commanded a team of 6 individuals, including 2 Germans from the Baader-Meinhof group and 4 Arab fighters, into the OPEC headquarters in Vienna during a ministerial gathering. The mission demonstrated remarkable boldness in both scope and implementation. Presenting themselves as security staff, the team accessed the building carrying weapons concealed inside sports bags. Upon entering, they immediately discharged their firearms, resulting in 3 instant fatalities: an Austrian police officer, an Iraqi protection agent, and a Libyan economic advisor. They seized control of over 60 hostages, among them 11 petroleum ministers representing OPEC member nations. Carlos personally directed the entire operation, navigating throughout the building with dramatic self-assurance, delivering ultimatums, and making tactical choices with exactness. He compelled Austrian officials to supply transportation to the airport, subsequently demanding a DC-9 aircraft prepared and fueled for takeoff. The captives were transferred onto the aircraft and transported initially to Algiers, followed by Tripoli, before returning to Algiers. There, Carlos bargained for their freedom in return for guaranteed safe departure and an undisclosed payment thought to reach tens of millions of dollars. The operation stood as a propaganda victory for Palestinian militancy and represented a profound embarrassment for Western protection agencies. Carlos transformed into an international figure virtually overnight. Newspapers worldwide featured his image as the living representation of revolutionary violence. Mossad's examination of the OPEC incident uncovered something crucial. Carlos transcended the profile of just another militant executing commands. He possessed operational planning abilities with strategic comprehension, capable of managing multinational teams and carrying out intricate assignments under intense strain. Communications captured during the mission revealed him conversing in Spanish, French, Arabic, and English, transitioning effortlessly between various situations. He demonstrated psychological understanding, employing terror and dramatic display to achieve maximum political effect. Israeli evaluators determined he exemplified a new category of terrorist: well-educated, capable in multiple languages, operationally advanced, and disconnected from any particular ideology or group. He functioned as a weapon available for hire to anyone, rendering him both unpredictable and exceptionally hazardous. The determination was reached at the uppermost levels within the Israeli government. Carlos now held Red Page designation, meaning authorized for termination upon encounter. The pursuit had formally commenced. Locating Carlos proved virtually impossible using standard approaches. He employed numerous false identities, regularly modified his physical appearance, and relocated continuously among safe houses throughout Europe and Middle Eastern territories. He journeyed using fraudulent passports issued by Venezuela, Colombia, Peru, and numerous European nations. His contact network extended across Palestinian factions, European leftist militants, Libyan intelligence operations, and the East German Stasi, which furnished him with logistical assistance in exchange for operational information regarding Western security organizations. His lifestyle remained comfortable. He occupied expensive accommodations, operated luxury automobiles, and sustained romantic connections with women, completely unaware of his actual identity. Acquaintances from this time period characterized him as personable, multilingual, and entirely devoid of moral restraint. He could engage in philosophical conversation over wine during one evening, then strategize a bombing operation the following morning with identical detached efficiency. Mossad assigned its most capable surveillance experts to monitor him, yet Carlos consistently stayed ahead by one move. During 1975, French intelligence obtained information about his whereabouts in Paris and conducted a raid on an apartment located on Rue Tuileries. Carlos was in conference with two PFLP operatives when DST agents forced entry through the entrance. Chaos erupted immediately. Carlos seized a check-made pistol and discharged it, fatally shooting two DST officers and a Lebanese source before making his escape through a rear window. He departed Paris without delay, vanishing into a system of protected locations across Europe. The shooting elevated him to legendary status within militant communities, portraying him as someone who had terminated police officers at close range and escaped without injury. For Mossad, the incident validated what analysts had theorized. Carlos represented a danger not merely due to his beliefs or associations. His threat level stemmed from his readiness to kill instinctively, without pause, regarding violence as an instrument to deploy the instant situations demanded it. Israeli intelligence commenced constructing a psychological assessment, attempting to comprehend the individual beneath the operations. What materialized was an image of deep narcissism merged with operational capability. Carlos hungered for recognition and fame. He provided statements to media representatives, allowed himself to be photographed, and nurtured his persona as a revolutionary bon vivant. Nevertheless, underneath the swagger existed a competent tactician who grasped operational protection protocols, compartmentalization principles, and the critical importance of establishing multiple exit strategies. He seldom remained at a single address beyond several days. He transmitted messages through encrypted formats and intermediaries. He placed complete confidence in absolutely no one, not even his nearest collaborators. Mossad psychological specialists determined his character rendered him simultaneously vulnerable and difficult to capture. Vulnerable because his hunger for acclaim motivated him toward hazardous choices. Difficult to capture because his suspicion maintained his constant movement. The critical advancement arrived in 1976 when a Mossad intelligence source embedded within the East German Stasi supplied information indicating Carlos received shelter from communist administrations throughout Eastern Europe. The Stasi had furnished him with identification documents, protected addresses, and logistical backing in return for his function as a deniable resource capable of executing operations that East Germany could not publicly support. Carlos had evolved into an independent contractor for state-sanctioned terrorism. His capabilities were negotiated through go-betweens in Damascus and Tripoli. Israeli evaluators understood that Carlos was not functioning autonomously. He belonged to a wider structure of government-backed terror systems encompassing Libya, Syria, Iraq, and the Soviet Union. To remove him, Mossad would require disrupting that entire structure, cutting off his affiliations, and compelling him toward isolation where targeting became possible. Mossad's approach transformed from direct elimination to extended disruption. The objective centered on rendering Carlos harmful to his supporters, exposing his activities in methods that would compel governments to separate themselves from him. This demanded patience, meticulous intelligence accumulation, and partnership with Western protection services possessing their own motivations for neutralizing Carlos. Throughout the subsequent 10 years, Mossad agents penetrated Carlos's systems, converted his partners into sources, and distributed false intelligence crafted to generate suspicion within his circles. They disclosed particulars of his missions to news outlets, guaranteeing that his notoriety transformed into a disadvantage instead of a benefit. They monitored his monetary systems, pinpointing the accounts and go-betweens he utilized for transferring funds, and discreetly undermined them, compelling him to search desperately for financing. By the beginning of the 1,980 seconds, Carlos's operational capability had diminished substantially. His elevated visibility rendered him a target not exclusively for Israeli intelligence, but for every Western protection agency. His previous supporters initiated distancing efforts, acknowledging that connection with him attracted unwelcome scrutiny. Libya's Muammar Gaddafi, who had financed numerous Carlos operations, severed connections after international demands made ongoing support politically impossible. Syria's Hafez al-Assad, who had offered sanctuary, commenced limiting his travel. Even the Stasi, which had shielded him for years, developed caution as East Germany pursued improved relations with Western nations. Carlos discovered himself progressively isolated, transferring between lower-quality safe houses in Hungary, Romania, and Sudan. His reputation diminished as the world redirected attention toward emerging dangers. Mossad's monitoring throughout this timeframe remained unrelenting. Agents followed him through telephone intercepts, observed his activities through contacts within foreign intelligence organizations, and sustained databases of recognized associates. Every accommodation he utilized, every journey he reserved, every interaction he conducted received documentation and evaluation. The Israelis were not merely pursuing him for swift elimination. They were charting his complete operational system, recognizing weaknesses, and awaiting the instance when conditions would coordinate for a conclusive action. However, that instance remained difficult to achieve. Carlos maintained vigilance, infrequently exposing himself to circumstances where an assassination attempt could proceed without substantial ancillary danger. The conclusion initiated in 1990 with the Soviet Union's dissolution. The Cold War's termination destroyed the political frameworks that had protected Carlos for 2 decades. East Germany disappeared from existence, incorporated into a unified Germany possessing no motivation for safeguarding Soviet-period assets. Hungary, Romania, and Czechoslovakia underwent transitions to democratic administrations that desired integration with Western powers, not affiliation with international terrorists. Carlos's environment was falling apart. His benefactors had vanished, his systems were compromised, his protected locations were shuttered. By 1991, he had transferred to Khartoum, Sudan, among the limited remaining nations prepared to accommodate him. Sudan, governed by Hassan al-Turabi's Islamist administration, had transformed into a refuge for militant organizations, providing shelter to everyone from al-Qaeda operatives to Palestinian groups. Carlos resided there under Sudanese intelligence protection, though even that arrangement proved unstable. Sudan confronted international isolation resulting from its terrorism support, and the administration sought methods to reduce the strain. French intelligence, which had monitored Carlos since the 1975 Rue Tullier shooting incident, initiated discussions with Sudan regarding his extradition. The French possessed a straightforward legal justification. Carlos had murdered 2 DST officers on French territory. The Sudanese government, anxious to enhance relations with Western nations and terminate international penalties, recognized an advantage. In return for financial assistance and diplomatic acknowledgement, they would surrender Carlos to France. Mossad received notification of the discussions through intelligence-sharing protocols with French and American organizations. Israeli administrators considered whether to intervene, whether to insist that Carlos be transferred to Israel instead. Ultimately, they acknowledged that French detention accomplished the identical strategic objective. Carlos would face imprisonment, his operational capacity permanently removed. The symbolic significance of an Israeli apprehension was surpassed by the practical assurance of a French prosecution. On the 14th of August, 1994, Sudanese intelligence officers attracted Carlos to a private medical facility in Khartoum under the false premise of a medical treatment for his persistent testicular discomfort. He had experienced the ailment for years and trusted the Sudanese to organize confidential care. Upon his arrival at the facility, physicians working for Sudanese intelligence sedated him. During his unconscious state, he was transferred into a vehicle, transported to Khartoum airport, and positioned aboard a French government aircraft. Upon regaining consciousness, He found himself in French detention, restrained and monitored. The mission had been completed with calculated accuracy, representing Sudan's compensation for international acceptance. Carlos's apprehension transmitted den waves throughout the remaining militant systems he had previously navigated. For Mossad, it represented confirmation of an approach requiring 2 decades to accomplish. They had not terminated his life, yet they had secured something more meaningful. They had persisted longer than him. They had methodically destroyed the foundation, enabling his operations, separated him from his benefactors, and maneuvered him into circumstances where capture became unavoidable. It demonstrated the importance of patience within intelligence operations, the recognition that certain targets cannot be removed through a bullet, but must be weakened through continuous pressure across years. Carlos faced trial in France and received conviction for the 1,975 Rue Toulier homicides. He was given a life imprisonment sentence. In 1997, he underwent another trial for directing a bombing series in France throughout the 1,980 seconds and obtained an additional life sentence. In 2011, he confronted a third trial for a 1,974 Paris bombing that claimed 2 lives and secured yet another life sentence. During his legal proceedings, he sustained his defiance, utilizing the courtroom as a platform for delivering rambling declarations about imperialism and revolution. He characterized himself as a political captive, a freedom combatant victimized by Western authorities. However, the world had progressed beyond him. The Cold War had concluded, the Soviet Union had disappeared, and the philosophies that had inspired his youth had become historical artifacts. He was not a revolutionary hero. He was a remnant from a bygone period, a hired gun whose fame had exceeded his significance. Mossad's contribution to Carlos's demise remained predominantly confidential, disclosed only through portions within declassified materials and published recollections decades afterward. Israeli operatives had proved essential in monitoring his whereabouts, infiltrating his systems, and supplying intelligence to Western organizations that enabled his eventual apprehension. They had not discharged the weapon or executed the arrest, yet they had constructed the trap that captured him. It represented espionage as the practice of gradual erosion, diminishing a target through years of strain until apprehension became unavoidable. The Carlos mission disclosed essential realities about contemporary intelligence operations. Certain adversaries cannot be overcome through direct confrontation. They must be isolated, their assets exhausted, their systems undermined until they crumble beneath the burden of their own suspicion and the retraction of backing. Carlos's destruction was not the outcome of a solitary mission, but the completion of 2 decades of continuous exertion by numerous intelligence organizations coordinating across national boundaries. It illustrated the importance of international partnership, the necessity of patience, and the understanding that within intelligence operations, success frequently arrives not with dramatic impact, but with the silent securing of a prison entrance. Carlos the Jackal continues serving his imprisonment in France, fulfilling multiple life terms without parole eligibility. He has now reached 75 years of age, a mere fragment of the individual who once detained oil ministers as hostages and fought his escape from police operations. He continues providing sporadic statements from his confinement, continues discussing revolution and imperialism, continues maintaining he served as a warrior in a legitimate conflict. However, history has delivered its assessment. He was not a revolutionary. He was a mercenary who marketed violence to the wealthiest purchaser and surrounded it in ideological terminology to rationalize the bloodshed. Mossad's hunt for him was not motivated by vengeance or justice in any theoretical meaning. It centered on removing a danger, neutralizing an operative who had proven the determination and competence to damage Israeli concerns anywhere across the world. They achieved success not through assassination but through strategic patience, proving that occasionally the most powerful instrument is not a bullet, but time in its purest form.